Hello and welcome to the Pacific Pokemon Podcast. I'm Bambi and this is Lindsay, and this is our first episode. So just to kind of kick things off, I would like to talk about what teams we're running lately in Reg C.
Fair enough. Lately, I have been trying out a version of Wolfie Glick's team from Hartford. It's a very common core right now. Running the Fluttermane, Iron Hands, Tinglu, Gyarados, Chi-Yu, and Amoonguss. It's just a very strong core overall. I brought it to Fresno Regionals this past weekend as well. Unfortunately, I did not do too great. I ended up at 3-6 after battling Colin Higher in round 2. I feel like I kind of just started overthinking all of my plays from there on out for the rest of my matches and ended up being my own worst enemy. What about you,
Uh,
Bambi? What have you been running?
I've been running Manual Sun, also known as Murkrow Sun. It's essentially a hyper offense core of Chi Flutter with Great Tusk, supported by Gyarados, a hybrid Gyarados, and a Rocky Helmet Amoonguss to help deal with the GM-Pow Dragonites that are literally everywhere. That
And
you
how
can't redirect.
Dragonite is everywhere.
You can't redirect E-Speed, man. It's terrible. I don't know what to do about it other than just cry sometimes and get one-shotted. Um, and that's actually how a couple of my matches didn't end up boiling down. I was able to use Among Us a little bit, but I felt like I could use it a lot better. Um, my opponent kind of got some free switches in against my Terraflying Gyarados when I was going for some Terra Blast to start getting in some big chip damage in, so I could just swap into Pro and then Flutter and sweep from there. But I didn't make the right reads in the end. But I went 4-5 in the main event, um, which is
And
the same I
then,
did in Portland, but it's completely opposite concepts for teams I was running for Portland and Fresno.
yeah, your Portland team was Parish Song, if I remember correctly, Parish Trap, and pretty much just Parish Trap was the whole
Yeah, it was
strategy.
it it was an
Gothitelle, Screamtail, and remind me the rest of it.
Gothitelle Scream. It was Gothitelle, Screamtail, Flutter, Amoonguss, and Palafin.
That's right, you
So
were running
basic.
Palafin still back then.
Yeah, this is back in early May, back when Palance was still cool, and we had another name for it back then that we don't speak of anymore. Sometimes it's good to just let bad names die. Um, but yeah, it was essentially a adaptation on Wolfie Glick's Orlando team, which was a Series 2 Parish Trap team that won him the biggest regionals
Hmm?
um, so
Yep,
far. Um,
over 800 Masters players.
yep, and the biggest difference was I was running Chiyu with Snarl and Nasty Plot instead of the Arcanine. Um,
Chi is a more offensive choice there, definitely understandable in certain scenarios. The
the
Arcanine
hyper the
has
hyper offense mode went wild in Portland.
It did. That was where it
Uh,
definitely kicked off, considering that Joe UX9 brought it to a victory with the Torkoal and Jumpluff hyper offense.
yeah, honestly, I just think right now the fire type defensively is really overlooked. It's one of the big like main three types of fire, water, grass in a way that like it's got some really unique defensive coverage to help like pair with like the rest of like fill in the gaps for what the other two types don't do, in my opinion.
I agree. I
Um,
think Fire has a great defensive coverage all in all. Doesn't
yeah,
Fire
it's
resist
one of the
Fairy?
one
Or
of
is
the
it the other
only
way
answers
around?
to what was that?
Fire resists Fairy, doesn't it? Or is it the other way around?
Yeah, fire resist fairy.
Yep.
And just having a single fire type on your team will give you an answer to being able to um, pick up like revenge KOs when your opponent decides to go for like a dazzling gleam without terror typing their enough to flutter main.
Mm-hmm.
So you can basically punish them for early terras that way if you just even have any fire type, honestly, right now, or even any Terra Fire right now. Iron Hands with Terra Fire go in AV goes absolutely crazy into any Flutter main team,
Absolutely.
and that's kind
Absolutely.
of where I've been kind of running into with all my teams right now. Is like Iron Hands is just so good into everything right now. Um,
Iron Hands is phenomenal,
it's kind
honestly.
of like the like if I think of like Scarlet and Violet paradox farms, it's kind of like the Flutter main of Violet in a way of like it's like the most like I don't mean to dump on Bundle,
Oh,
but I
that's
think
true.
Iron Hands is more viable on a lot more teams. So I think it's more like the Flutter main of the generation.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I mean, what a great way to segue into our most recent regionals, the 2023 Fresno Regionals, and going over some of the usage statistics of that because Iron Hands was popping up everywhere.
I had
Iron Hands
such a
came in
hard time
first
with Iron
place,
Hands.
second place, fourth place. I mean, Iron Hands just all the way through all of top 32 on nearly 50% of the team, I think.
Even where Iron Hands didn't end up top cutting, it was dominating. I played in the player challenge side event through Arcanine on Sunday. So day two of Fresno that was going on
Premier
while they were
Challenge.
doing
Yeah.
the main event day two and streaming of all the matches and whatnot. And um, I just want to give a shout out to Ryan Haig. I hope I'm saying his last name right. Uh, that guy was running double fake out Gothitelle Iron Hands, and that was just absolutely crazy to try and read into, like when he was going to swap and cycle fake outs.
It's a great way to put on pressure, especially with Gothitel's Shadow Tag. And if I remember correctly, he was running Trick Room, or not Trick Room, Perish Song in that team,
No,
correct?
no, you're wrong. It was a
No
trick room
Perish.
team. No pair. I don't think if I don't remember his team sheet exactly, but from what I recall, I saw his team in the first. My very first thought was, "Wow, no Parish with Gothitelle. All right, let's go."
And just utilizing that Gothitelle and the Iron Hands to do easy free damage with Fake Out and preventing switches at the same time.
Yeah, the original, uh, not the original draft, but the second draft of my Fresno team, which still had defensive Terra types on my hyper offense core, um, instead of offensive Terra types on my core. I feel like it would have done a lot better here, specifically just because Tusk would have been able to survive at least another hit versus just getting basically O code after a headlong rush and psychic read instead of a fake out. Because that's what's one of the biggest things about fake out is you can just not do it and get right into the rest of your setup.
Yep, and it makes such a big difference sometimes doing that as
And for me, it felt just like it came down to um, like literally just reading who the opponent was with how you play it out. Like you try and get a feel for what they do as a player, and you try and like decide whether or not you're going to play up or down into it.
mm-hmm. As we're going here, um, let's move into the Fresno top teams. Emilio Forbes, if y'all didn't know, came in first place. He showed back up again finally at a regional this year and decided to take the whole thing home. With a very common core, he brought the Iron Hands, Iron Bundle, King Gambit, Arcanine, Amoonguss, and Fluttermane. Very similar to what I brought, very similar to what a lot of players brought as well. Those are some of the top Pokemon in the meta currently. This was, I believe, his first event in Scarlet and Violet. If I remember correctly, his last event was Caucus in 2020. So this is his first 200 premier or championship points from a major event. If he's been going to any locals nearby him, he may have already picked up enough to get that world's invite. He was running the choice specs on his Flutter main, Dazzle, Moonblast, Shadow Ball, and Trick Room, which that Trick Room tech on a specs Flutter main is definitely a bit of an interesting decision. However, it did show to be very useful for him, giving his Iron Hands, Amoonguss, and Gambit a lot more versatility with the rest of his team. And on the other half, we've got the Arcanine with the safety goggles, Flying Terra to dodge those very common Ting Lu attacks, as well as Great Tusk.
Oh man,
Flare Blitz,
Tinglu
Extreme
was
Speed, Will-O-Wisp,
everywhere in
Protect.
Fresno.
Ting Lu definitely was. It's
It's like
effectively the
it's
only
like
version
everybody has a
of.
new pair of shoes on and their New Balances.
Well, if you consider this, Intimidate has always been a very strong ability within all metas of VGC, ever since abilities existed. The ability to switch a Pokemon in and lower your opponent's offenses in that same turn is really powerful. There's never been anything like that for special attack until Ting Lu. Ting Lu is the closest thing to an Intimidate for special attack that has ever existed, and it is the only thing with anything like that whatsoever.
You need screens for 4 turns instead of 8 with Light Clay, and and at least get halfway there. Have Tinglu on the field and friends. You're welcome.
Nothing goes down. Yep. Nothing goes down at all.
And I mean, like one of the things too that's kind of crazy about it is like right now we have power levels in our metagame, like just with like Chiyu and Fluttermane and Bundle, where they're all hitting like 135 special attack. And when you take like 25% cut from Team Lu out of that, that's still hitting for like around like 100 stat total tier for special attack. And that's not anything to snuff at. Anybody who's played any metagame with like a mythical Pokemon in it, like Mew, you know just how punishing just even having a base 100 special attack can be on a team.
I mean, even then, looking at Arcanine, Arcanine is a great example of that. If I remember correctly, Arcanine is a base 100 special attack and a base 110 attack. If I remember correctly, or it's about a base 100 range on that
Mm-hmm.
attack stat, and so it's definitely,
And
a
it's not like
very
you're at
similar
100.
candidate.
You're cutting like well above 100, even
Yeah,
after
Arcanine's a
the
base
best
110
delivering.
attack,
Oh, I
and
was
so
thinking about the
considering that
special
Arcanine
attackers,
is a
but
base
with Arcanine being
110,
Arcanine's a great partner too because it can add priority pressure
well, of
on top of
course.
that. So you can like avoid redirection by extreme speeding and EQing in the same turn if you need to. Like if Arcanine's going to go down, but you can potentially usually pick up like pinch KOs that way.
Absolutely, extreme speed being a +2 priority means that it effectively has the same speed priority as Rage Powder and Follow Me. So as long as you're faster than the opponent that's using that move, you'll outspeed them still anyway, since you're both using the same priority move.
And one thing that I would like to note about extreme speed and speed tiers is that Arcanine typically will have a better extreme speed because it'll go first. So sometimes you can actually KO the Terra Normal Dragonite with your extreme speed before they're able to pick up a kill like on your partner, like
This is
potentially
also
putting
true.
in good chip damage into like Tinglu next to you or something like that.
Arcanine does have a higher base speed stat than Dragonite, therefore is able to reach higher overall speeds. Almost always outspeed that Dragonite, running a very bulky Arcanine and against a very fast Dragonite.
hmm And
Or if
you're
there's a
usually
choice
not
scarf
running into
involved.
fast Dragonite. Fast Dragonite is very few and far between.
Absolutely. Dragonite definitely does much better with bulks thanks to multiscale. The ability to just take a hit without caring pairs very well with Orthworm as well, coincidentally. because that substitute, if the Dragonite coming in with Earthworm is at full HP, the substitute also gains the multi-scale boost, which just makes it absolutely so difficult to break through sometimes.
One of the teams that I spent the most prep time in for Fresno, just expecting to see the combo have really good results. And late into the metagame was Dragonite Champao, and one team I prepped for was TSL Tang, quite a bit, and the entire time I just felt like I just need to get better with Amoonguss. Amoonguss is just the way to answer that duo usually is with well played Rage Powders and Spore turns.
Yeah, if only Dragonite's extreme speed was able to be rage powdered, unfortunately.
That's the big drawback is you just gotta figure out a way to somehow get them to take some chip damage from Rocky Helmet, usually. So that way you don't have to rely like on a high roll from your back line and surviving a KO. And that's a big part for why Tusk is there on my team and Gyarados is there because they usually can eat the hits that Flutter and Chiyu can't, even if
Indeed.
it's immune to Intimidate.
On the subject of Dragonite and Qianpao, Chuppa Cross came in 5th place overall in a 12-2 Swiss record, second best in the Swiss rounds, behind only Emilio Forbes, who went 13-1.
Man, what a couple of players. Emilio Forbes
Absolutely
coming back is
insane.
huge. But
And
man,
he
Chopper
came
Cross
back
was
and just
impressive.
decided to pull it out, no stops, straight to the top. Gavin Michaels came in second. Phenomenal player still. He won a regional earlier this year. I forget exactly which one off the top of my head. But he brought basically the exact same team. I think it is exactly the same team. He may have changed up some of those EVs a bit. You know how everybody does that sometimes. But looking at the Goldengo, the Amoonguss, Fluttermane, Azumarill, Pelipper, and the Iron Hands. I believe actually what he was running before was the Palafin instead of the Azumarill, if I remember
I,
correctly.
I think the big thing that he was getting value out of Azumarill with uh, was that it just has immediate value. Like you just get huge power right away, which some people might like. It might mislead you to think it's like base 100 stat total, but because it's doubling the stat value, not the
Mm-hmm.
base stat, you're getting actually like if
It's
you're running
actually like a
Adamant Max.
base 140.
Yeah, Max Adamant gives you huge. It's up there with power levels like Ursaluna and Reg D
It's nearly base
and Iron
140
Hands
attack stat at
in Reg C
max. Yes, it
and
does
onward.
basically the exact same. It's
And
absolutely incredible.
it's got a typing to boot with it too.
Mm-hmm. The
Um,
ability to
I've been facing
resist,
a lot of Gavin Michaels' team on rank ladder recently on Showdown.
of course. It's a very good team all in all, and
Like I
he piloted it
home,
absolutely perfectly.
got home from Fresno, and like that's all I would see on Reg C ladder, and it was just like Gavin Michaels' team. I was like, I know you're gonna try and trick my Amoonguss. I was there in person to see the line happen.
To see the value of tricking that Amoonguss and just absolutely shutting it down so hard.
Yeah,
Getting a
it
good
just
item
takes
off
away
of
its
it usually as
options.
well.
It really is choice.
Coming in third, we have Zachary Thornburg. He's been putting up a lot of good performances this season. He's done very well. 11-3 in the Swiss rounds. He brought the Fluttermane Screamtail to third. So best Screamtail. This time around, there are quite a few coming up in some of these top teams here. I see 3 within the first top 10. Top 11, actually. Excuse me. Number
Screamtail is
11 brought
underrated.
Screamtail.
In my opinion, Screamtail is Roaring Moon's natural predator in the wild,
Screamtail
and
is
it should be respected
fantastic.
as such. It gives you so many control answers. I think, yeah, he used Encore and Disable here.
Encore disabled
Um,
Dazzling Gleam with the booster energy. Yep.
do you remember what his booster was? His stat?
Booster speed.
That's what I thought. And then it was probably like the 60 special attack IVs to be able to pick up that bare minimum 4 times hit KO on things that are 4 times weak.
Possibly,
Um,
possibly.
I honestly think that this is a team that, like, you replace Talonflame with maybe replace Talonflame. Gale Wings is pretty strong with Brave Bird, but Tornadus I think would be a really cool adaptation to turning this into a Reg D team. I'm just a huge fan of Mouse Ape and like Mickey Mouse shenanigans. Uh,
Mouse Ape is actually really good though, all in all. I mean,
it even
even
an open
in
team
open team
sheet.
sheets, everybody always says open team sheets is the bane of Mouse Ape because it's such a versatile pair in terms of what it can do. And on ladder, you never know whether you're gonna run into the bulky friend guard, super fang, follow me, beat up shenanigans on the mouse holder. If you're gonna run into the wide lens, technician boosted, population bomb. And then on that
Or you
annihilate,
could
you
run
never
into
know if it's actually going to be
my
something
Mouse
with
Ape.
like a
My Mouse
phantom
Ape is
force.
a Friend Guard, Population Bomb into Terra Rock um, Ape, so that way it gets the basically the max damage
Why
roll
not
from
Terra
the resist.
Steel?
What because it does it? I don't think steel resists normal anymore, or I
Yes,
don't
it
know if it
does.
ever did.
It always
Does it?
has. Absolutely.
I usually go with Terra Rock because I think Rock Slide's an option on Ape I have for that team.
Even then, Terra Steel is far more defensive. It gives you defensive capabilities against fairy moves, which you'll already be taking as the ape. It's just the right call if you're going to go for that.
Hmm. I don't know.
Terra
I
Steel
don't
all the way.
remember
If
what
you're
I was
not going
afraid of.
Terra Fire, Terra
I wasn't
Steel.
afraid of Chi because this is a series two. This is a series two team, or excuse me, Regulation B.
Retroactive regulation.
Yes,
Understandable.
we at some point
He
as a
brought a
community
great
we
team.
have to decide on what to canonically call this moment. Like, are we gonna go with Regulation ABC? Or are we really gonna go Series 1, 2, Regulation CD?
Yep. We're going to just stick with what the names were through the whole thing. And it's going to be even more confusing than anything ever has been.
If you're just getting now into Pokemon, this is never a problem. This is only like a now problem.
Well, I can kind of understand it. The way that they ran their timing early on was very confusing because if I remember correctly, Series 1, all of Series 1 was like Season 1.
Yeah.
And then Series 2 was Season 2 and Season 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got really confusing because it was Season 2 and Season 3. And then they were like, wait, is it Season 3 or Series 3? And then they were like, it's Regulation C. And everybody was like, oh, you're just going to do that. Okay. You're going to change the whole naming scheme. Cool.
So this is the way you're gonna run things. I see you.
But
I
at the
see
same time,
you.
it did clear up all of the confusion going forward. So that was a big help, at least on that.
Yeah, honestly, we can just complain all we want, but this is just the life we live.
It's the life we live, it's the game we play. It's just like complaining about getting frozen. It's just like complaining about those flinches, paralyzed turns, 3 turn sleeps. You know, we complain when we get them again when they hit against us, and we love it when they work for us. So it's just kind of how Pokemon goes, and it's just always what it's gonna be.
It's kind of my favorite part about Pokemon in a way, just because it like you never know what to expect. You can always get good RNG, like get high rolls or low rolls, or you can get secondary effects. And you can always like do. There's always a way to manipulate those kinds of things in Pokemon.
Indeed, and as I'm looking through these top teams here currently, Palafin did not make it into the top 8 whatsoever. It did come in 9th and 10th, though,
But
by
what do we
Neil
see? We
Patel
see
and Jimmy Freed.
two. We see two Azumarill underneath of it, and we see Azumarill above it.
Azumarill was above it. Gyarados came in above it. There is actually not Dondozo in top 6 in this tournament as well. This is a classic Series 2 team with Fluttermane, Amoonguss, Arcanine, Baxcalibur, and the Dondozo pair, Tatsugiri,
Where
Dondozo.
you? I know you didn't play in the PC on Sunday. Were you able to catch any of Kalen Brown's play? Because he was the only Dozo player in top eight.
Unfortunately, I missed that myself. I was pretty interested in the team brought by the person who ended up in 29th place, way down here, Mr. VJ
Oh
Su,
my goodness, we're
bringing
gonna
the
go.
absolute wildest team anybody has and probably ever will see in Regulation C going forward.
This is.
Meowscarada, Tinkaton, Ironmoth, Braviary, Azumarill, and Gardevoir.
I don't think you're gonna see like higher level of Azumarill play out of anybody than you'll see out of VJ because this is like Mystic Water, uh, Aqua Jet Ice Spinner. This is old school Palafin basically with coverage for terrain and dragon types.
And for the Amoonguss,
Oh yeah,
that was
it's
his claim there, not
Palaf
wanting to get stuck up against the Amoonguss and not
Palafin
having any answers.
with an ice punch that actually picks up the Mungus KO.
Sometimes. That depends a bit on how bulky that Amoonguss is, but Azumarill does do a bit more damage generally than Palafin would. Now, when it comes to other interesting Pokemon in the top cut from Fresno,
Oh, can we talk about
there's a
Aaron
couple
Zing's
of
team?
people with, yep, there's a couple of people running the T-Tar Lycanroc core. Some of them running a Series 1 style T-Tar Lycanroc core. The T-Tar Lycanroc Indeedee Armarouge Tatsugiri Dondozo team that kind of has just been the Series 1 top, more or less. The only thing that's full Series 1 that's really been able to hold its own and get up in the top echelon here. Andrew Ding coming in 19th place. Or no, not Andrew Ding. Right above him, 18th place. Tyler Alexander came in with that team. And then Aaron Cybertron Zhang bringing just like the updated version of that T-Tar Lycanroc core, swapping in the bundle, Fluttermane, Garchomp, and Corviknight. Obviously, that Assault Vest on the Tyranitar basically just his absolute best item, giving it so much special defense thanks to the Sandstorm boost for rock typing as well, up until it terastallizes, at least that is. Pairing it with that Lycanroc, of course, Sandrush giving Lycanroc double the speed, Focus Sash being the most common item on Lycanroc, and Aaron was definitely running that as well. Terra-type Ghost is a little bit different here than I've seen some other times, but it also definitely makes sense to avoid the fake outs and to avoid some pesky fighting type moves here and there, from those Iron Hands that are very common right now.
You gotta preserve that focus sash.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, like the way it works out is like you get that focus sash in the middle of the turn before, and Black Rock's able to get a move off before it dies to a double into it or a sand chip damage after tearing.
Yeah, helps it to survive that hit sometimes.
Sometimes that one rock slide or Accelerock is all you need, usually too.
True, true. He did not actually run that Accelerock here in this scenario.
Oh, there's no
Mostly
Accelerock on
because
this one.
because Lycanroc I think is that fast. But
Yeah,
he
it
was
does.
running the
And
Rock Slide
priority
close
stocks
combat,
aren't high in Red Sea unless your
Endeavor,
name
and
is
Protect.
Dragonite.
They aren't and they are at the same time. Amoonguss being as common as it is kind of the reason why I don't think priority
You just
stocks are as
gotta
high as they could
you,
be,
you
unless
gotta
it's
be able
extreme
to hit
speed.
those higher than priority one moves.
Yep. So that extreme speed is kind of the niche of priority right now. Garchomp, he was running the Sandvale Garchomp, Sandvale substitute. Thankfully, he wasn't running Bright Powder in there as well, just running classic Sandvale because on a sand team, why not? Rough Skin is good damage, but Sandvale being able to help you dodge hits can actually sometimes give you just such a huge advantage in the blink of an eye. Substitute Protect, Earthquake, and Dragon Claw, I think is just a really safe set, all in all, with the Terra Steel to protect from
And
Fluttermane.
and his name is John Cena.
His name is John C. Corviknight reminds me of the John Cena with that body press coming in. Body press, Brave Bird, Tailwind, and Roost being the set there. Mirror Armor, of course, running a Citrus Berry and a Fire Terra type. The Fire Terra type is definitely a bit interesting. Um, the only thing, obviously, you resist there is the Fire type attacks, being the only thing that really would be hitting you super effective anyway. Corviknight only being weak to Fire and Electric. Natively, that provides a resistance to one and a neutrality to the other.
The Chi stocks are really high right now. Just because like Flutter Chi is uh and hyper offense is just super splashable. Like you need to
So
be able to do a
powerful.
lot of special damage, and you have two Pokemon slots to do it with your four you chose. Flutter Chi,
So incredibly powerful. And I think that's where
and
this team actually stands out. You know, that T-Tar Lycanroc being
yeah,
able to actually go up against that pair and at least do some solid damage with Rock Slide, especially even against Scarf Chi-Yu's. Rock Slide being able to hit that from Lycanroc before Chi-Yu is even able to do damage, before Fluttermane is able to hit. You know, Sand Rush on such a high base speed Pokemon of Lycanroc, I believe at 112 base speed.
for Lycanroc, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Yep. 112 base speed, 115 base attack. Not great defenses, and that's why it definitely runs that focus sash. 75 HP, 65 defense, 65 special defense. We were just talking about base stat total earlier, but this thing's running down at low 487. The Lycanroc kind of just sticking around because it's the only good Sand Rush user that we have in the metagame right now. Everybody's just
Where's
kind of
my
holding
Excadrill
out
Game
for
Freak
Excadrill,
Pokemon?
exactly.
Where is my Excadrill DLC, please?
I don't recall if Excadrill is coming in DLC. If I remember
I don't
correctly,
think it's
it is so
happening.
far not
From what I
released.
remember from the list, I don't think it's coming back. And neither is Whimsicott. That's just the way she goes, folks.
Thank goodness there, honestly. Excadrill would be fantastic, but it definitely was a very meta-defining Pokemon in a lot of
There's no
ways.
such thing as Fluttermane in a world where Excadrill exists.
Uh, I disagree with that, honestly. I think Fluttermane still would definitely exist, but it definitely would not have the popularity that it currently does.
It wouldn't be number one for the
It
entirety
would not be, yeah,
of
number one
ranked
for all of it.
seasons for this game.
Because Fluttermane right now is the very top of Regulation C and has been pretty much since the meta got going. His
Yeah.
bundle, he was running very classic Booster Energy, Icy Wind, Hydro Pump, Freeze Dry, Protect, very safe. Terra Flying is a bit different. I guess just to pair the bundle with the Garchomp and potentially Terra Flying to dodge those Earthquakes early on and still get your speed control so Garchomp can retaliate with a lot of damage.
Yeah,
Honestly,
man.
that's the only thing
I'm
that makes
so
any
glad I didn't
sense
have to
there.
face this team.
I guess it does provide a resistance to the grass type attacks, which to an extent have been popping up. You know, Terra Grass, Chi-Yu being a great defensive and
It also
offensive
gives
type.
you a resistance into fighting type moves, so like close combats
This is true. This is true from the Iron
that
Hands.
run from coverage,
However,
things
it
like
does mean you're
Paladin too.
still weak to the electric type moves from that Iron Hands. The wild charges, the volt switches, and thunder punches.
Yeah, yeah.
Does
It's
mean you're
really
still weak.
interesting. I feel like it's also just kind of like the answer for EQ spam teams.
Indeed, indeed.
Great Tusk that really struggles against anything with terrifying.
That it does. Great Tusk can't really stop, especially an Iron Bundle with Terra Flying. You know, Iron Bundle being a
It
great
avoids
Pokemon
its
just to
natural
counter Great
stab,
Tusk
and then it
anyway.
has great type, two great stab moves to be able to answer Great Tusk's most common Terra types outside of Steel.
Yep, absolutely. Some of the other interesting Pokemon I'm seeing here in the top cut. I really like seeing this at number 21, the Farigiraf.
Farigiraf is
One of my
huge here.
favorites from this meta in general in this generation. I love that he actually used the offensive Terra Blast here on the Farigiraf because its native normal typing gives it that solid base power, single target 80 normal stab move until you terastalize, and then it still gives you the stab bonus with your terastalization.
Well, yeah, one thing I really notice about this team is it's really reliant on being able to make the right reads because there's only one uh, spread move, and that's Icy Wind on this team. And even then, that's just for speed control. So you're
That
really
is
not trying
true.
to make a protect read when you're clicking Icy Wind at all, or even wide guard reads at that point, because usually people won't even wide guard an Icy Wind because it's not doing damage really.
This is also true. Wide guard usage I've seen has diminished a lot. There's not a lot of meta that are able to get it. Iron Valiant, ironically being the highest base stat total with wide guard, terrible stat distribution to utilize it correctly.
And right now, Armor stocks are down.
Armor stocks are low. I do want to point out Garganical though. I think Garganical actually is in a better place than some people are giving it credit for currently.
Oh man, Garganical, what a lovely Pokemon.
I think it's actually going to gain more footing going forward. There are quite a few people thinking that this is the end of Garganical, and honestly, I don't quite agree with that. I
If you
think
think
Wide
this is
Guard
the
is
end
going
of
to become
Garganical,
very
you haven't
useful.
had to face it as your last Pokemon in a 1v1 scenario to try and fish for a crit for an end game while it waits for you to slowly whittle away.
Well, and the other thing too to keep in mind is that the genies are coming in Regulation D, and while it's not super effective against all of them, Garganical natively is able to resist Tornadus's Bleak Wind Storm with no issues. It doesn't take a lot from Thundurus either. No, Garganical just has so much natural bulk in the 100, 130, and 90
Hmm.
defense spread.
And being
This
able to
thing is
hit something with Assault
fantastic.
here, that initial super effective hit damage is like basically being able to tack on a free Salt Cure damage turn
Oh, every
into
time.
your calcs.
Even when you have
Uh,
absolutely no attack investment, this thing does good damage. And its ability is
it
still
does.
fantastic,
It's
guaranteeing
got
the fact that you
that
don't take
golden. It's got that
status.
almost as good as gold.
Hmm. Plus, it also has the damage taken from ghost type moves, meaning that you can
Hmm.
even terrastalize ghost and resist those ghost type moves still, giving you
Yeah,
that immunity to the fighting moves that would hit you super effectively before that as well.
this is like the stall version of Rhyperior. It
Absolutely.
fits. It fits well on Trick Room. It fits well on big stall teams where you're just trying to bring the biggest, bulkiest Pokemon and just take less damage than your opponent to win. Um,
If only we
and
had something kind of like a Celesteal.
if only we had Celesteela.
No, let's keep Celesteela out of this meta. Unfortunately,
Celest,
that thing is going to be a little too dominant if it ever returns in this game.
give me a Leech Seed user not named Wu Qian, please,
We have multiple, actually. They're just not
that
very
are
defensive,
viable.
unfortunately.
Like, I want my Venusaur back.
None of them are all that defensive. That's kind of the biggest downside with Leech Seed currently. We've got good Leech Seed Pokemon. They just, none of them have defensive pressure. They're all mostly offensive.
Yeah, and if
Other
you
than maybe
want,
like
like,
Appleton and Arboliva, but I mean, who's
they're
using
digging at the
Appleton and
bottom of the barrel
Arboliva?
for those picks.
Arboliva is not the worst, but unfortunately, it's
There's that
very
one Arboliva
obvious.
team that's been rolling around on closed ladder that's been rolling people.
Arboliva is really solid when you don't know what to do against it, but it doesn't have quite enough in its tank to be able to do really, really well unless you guarantee that you're running Trick Room with it or you have an additional way to support it kind of thing, you know? Go-Go
Hmm.
also being a decent leech seeder actually with that 123 base HP that it has. That thing can recover quite a bit. Both Lilligants get it, obviously, as well. Hisuian being quite a bit faster at 105 base speed, too. However, neither of them is very much HP to take advantage of Leech with. Yeah, Wo-Chien
There we go.
still
There
really
we go.
is the best.
I see a good drummer down there at the right there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Rillaboom. As he comes
Yeah.
back, he does have access to Leech Seed. And Grassy Surge with Leech Seed is just an obnoxious combination. That's for sure.
Yeah, his name is DK Donkey Kong.
I could only imagine what it would be like if we had Rillaboom and Celesteela in the same meta.
Oh man.
We
Oh
did with Tapu
man.
Bulu, but
That's crazy. Oh, don't remind me of Alola, please.
Tapu Bulu, Celesteela,
Barf.
Bulbell. The
No,
Bull was my
please.
favorite from Alola of the four. I definitely was an
Oh,
Assault Vest Tapu Bulu user.
yeah, I bet you were.
AV Bulu.
Oh man.
Horn Leech. Oh, beautiful. That move was fantastic.
That was a beautiful move. Speaking of a beautiful move, taunt on this Focus Sash Fluttermane.
Definitely a unique choice. Makes
I
sense
think
with the Trick
who
Room.
what's
Probably to
who
counter some Tailwinds or something, maybe?
this is Robert Matthews. Let me
Mm-hmm.
check to see if I faced against him because this team is really familiar.
Probably
I'm
one of
pretty
the
sure
only giraffes in the entire tournament. He
I
came in
faced a giraffe
21st,
team,
though.
and I'm not sure if this is the one. Let me
You're
check
able to access it. Go for it.
my Arcanine really quick.
There's another interesting pick down here at number 26. Go over there a little bit more of the details on Robert Matthews' team. Moonblast, Shadow Ball, Taunt, and Protect being that
No,
Fluttermane
I didn't face against
set. So there's
this for a giraffe, but I did face against a for a giraffe in Fresno.
fair enough, fair enough. Yeah, that Fluttermane not running the Dazzling Gleam here, just going for the single target attacks in Moonblast and Shadow Ball. King Lu running the Ruination, Throat Chop, Protect, and Stomping Tantrum, holding the leftovers with Poison Terra. Solid Ting Lu overall. Uh, Stomping Tantrum, of course, being what it is, running the double dark type attacks, though, in Ruination and Throat Chop. Throat Chop, I guess, is a solid answer for Perish Song. You're worried about that, and it's an Azumarill, I guess, because that's the only thing that Ting Lu has a chance to outspeed.
When your only
Otherwise, if you're
ghost
in
type's
Trick
name
Room,
is Fluttermane, you should be worried about Perish Song.
I mean,
And
most people's only ghost type is Fluttermane. However, he does have the ghost Terra type on the Iron Bundle to avoid the fake outs
I think at
predominantly
least
in there.
four of my 9 matches from Portland would agree.
Oh yeah,
I don't know. What do you think? You were one of my 4 matches in Portland.
Perish Song was good. Perish Song was definitely good then. Unfortunately, it can't keep up in the higher damage of the meta that we're getting into nowadays,
Nope,
but
not until we get a legendary or a pseudo legendary or a mythical that also has shadow tag or something like that.
something with a notably higher base stat total than just Gothitelle, unfortunately.
Just just give us something that's based at 600 total, please. That has shadow tag, Game Freak.
That's not going to happen anytime soon. That ability would be, I think, honestly. Arena
mm,
Trap or Shadow Tag to that level.
Somebody can dream about a box legendary they'd like that.
Yeah, I don't think they're ever going to do a regular ability on a box legendary again now.
Imagine
It
if
was a
they
good
did
time when they did, but
better. Imagine if, like better shadow tag that nobody could switch
oh
out of.
man. Like Necrozma level Shadow Tag kind of thing. Shadow
Yes,
Steal or Shadow Theft or something like that, you know?
some
Steals your
crazy
shadow so you can't
shenanigans.
switch out, and it
And
like
and
lowers your offensive capabilities or something like that.
and there you got your colorless version
That's
Pokemon game,
terrible. Nope.
box legendary. Yep,
Pokemon no color.
Pokemon colorless
They've already done white as well, so you can't even say that. Or black, because
or
black is
crystal.
technically the absence of all color.
Crystal's translucent, so
It's wild. Moving on to that next interesting team. We got the nicknamed Lil UFO here, the Klefki, run by Ben Emerzian, who came in 26th place at
this is the
Fresno.
most expensive pair of keys I've ever seen, and I drive a Tesla.
Klefki is Lefkey is a solid Pokemon in the right scenarios. Thunder Wave being really solid into a lot of the meta here. Unfortunately, you always have to remember that it can't affect those dark types, so you can't affect Chi-Yu, you can't affect Wo-Chen. Obviously, you can't affect things like Roaring Moon or Meowscarada or whatever either.
Also, you
Uh,
get blocked by Psychic Terrain on that T wave
indeed, indeed. However,
and
there is
DD.
not a whole lot of Psychic Terrain. Yep, there's not a whole lot of Indeedee use going around right now. Although it has been popping up a little bit more again as people are returning back to those classic cores that just are able to output really good damage when you make the right reads into what the obvious play on the opposing side is.
I think
Indeedee
at this
Armarouge
point,
does pair really well into Iron
yeah,
Hands.
Indeedee Armor is just goaded, just like Flutterfish is and Chiampao Dragonite is, in my opinion.
I do agree. They're not quite as strong as some other Pokemon, but they definitely are capable of holding their own. And in
Stocks
the
are down,
hands
but
of
if
the
your
right,
opponent doesn't have a single Dark type on their team, you
exactly,
can just Terra Psychic Twisted Spoon, Psychic Terrain boosted, um,
expanding force.
Expanding Force, and if you have speed control at the same time, there's nothing that stands in front of you.
Yep,
Not even
you're able to
not.
pick up incredibly quick KOs.
And this is a world where Tinglu doesn't exist too on the game state.
Or this is the world where Tinglu has already been KO'd.
That's kind of how that usually works.
Yep. You usually lead that Indeedee Armarouge into that kind of like Dragonite Chen-Pao core, obviously, where it just pairs really well, putting down the Psychic Terrain, preventing the Chen-Pao going for the priority attacks. And I
Yeah,
believe it prevents
and
you from
spamming Lunar
taking damage.
Blessing on uh into a Ursaluna with a lead with Indeedee Armourouge in the back, that will usually get you through any Tinglu.
True, true, but that's in Regulation D.
It's true. We're thinking ahead.
We're still in Reg C right now.
Some people would have you believe that we're in Regulation D already, but it's not for another 2 weeks.
Nope, that indeed.
Um,
Roaring
I
Moon
ran
being
a
another interesting choice here. Booster Energy Flying Set being that classic acrobatics throat chop, protect and tailwind. Pretty standard Roaring Moon in that aspect there. Terra flying acrobatics
mhm.
shenanigans. It does hit really hard, and it honestly can KO a lot of Amoonguss.
You know, this team really strikes me as something that see from like East Coast Pokemon players a lot. And by that I mean like East Coast Pokemon players are a really big fan of strong fantasy cores. Usually, from what I've noticed,
True, true.
like
You got the Garchomp, the Roaring Moon, the Corviknight, the
Corviknight
Klefki,
right
and
there,
the Fluttermane on this team. So 5 of the 6
and
Pokemon are fantasy core.
I don't know this player. I don't know this team's history, but I will say like I see that bulky life orb Chiyu coming a mile away. That thing's like almost all HP and speed, nothing else. It definitely runs off of the life orb carry.
Life Orb definitely does a lot on Chi-Yu specifically as well. Flamethrower, Dark Pulse, Terra Blast, and Protect. Tons of damage coming out of that
Mm-hmm.
tiny little fish. Terra type grass as well. A lot of damage. Great Dozo answer. It can kind of force the Dozos into doing their terrestrialization as well, so that you can come in with the Roaring Moon maybe and do Terra Flying acrobatics instead, bluffing that Terra Grass from the Chi-Yu, or forcing them to
Yep.
commit Terra in a different manner.
And at that point, usually you can, and I'm pretty sure, and you don't really have much like counterplay into that Chiyu because I'm fairly certain that with that Fluttermane, it's timid.
Possibly,
Um,
possibly.
Usually those Focus Sash Fluttermanes want to win those speed ties.
Indeed, yeah, those Focus Sash Fluttermanes usually are pretty speedy because they're wanting to make sure that they can outspeed the opposing Fluttermane. They'll keep their Focus Sash intact for another turn.
Exactly, exactly.
On the other interesting Pokemon to note, Paldean Tauros coming 39th. The Aqua version brought by Mason Cutler. An interesting set there. Zach Emerzian, who
Whoa,
I believe is going to be the
Armor
brother of
Rouge.
Ben Emerzian, running the Caesar,
That's right.
Armarouge, Sandy Shots, and Hydreigon, which is a really neat set. He came in 38th overall here. Substitute Booster Energy, Terra Electric Sandy, do massive electric damage. Terra Grass, Armarouge, Heatwave, Trick Room, Psychic, and Protect. No Indeedee paired with this Armarouge, interestingly enough.
Doesn't want
Amoonguss,
it. Doesn't need it. It's
definitely
worried about
not.
other
It's strong
things.
enough regardless. That
It really
Amoonguss
is.
with the Terra. I wonder if he just never, if he decided to just leave it Terra Poison so that the Black Sludge is able to
I'm pretty
continue
sure
recovering its
that
HP and just give
its
it the
primary
neutral
type is
HP
grass.
or its neutral damage to grass, you know? Just
Yeah, I
making
think
sure
it.
that it's Terra Poison that way. Because when you're breeding these Pokemon, it chooses it at random what the Terra type
Oh,
is.
so if this was a
If this
bred
was
Among Us,
bred down, it could have just
this is
been
probably
raw Terra Poison by nature. Or it
yeah.
could have
So
been
this
planned with the Black Sledge, because Black Sledge would deal damage to Amoonguss if you're grass-stylized and you're not Terra Poison.
and
Could
Terra
just be to
Poison
remove the flying
is
type
not a
resistance.
bad defensive type.
Yeah, it could just be to remove the fire and flying weakness, because at that point, Amoonguss.
And I think one of the coolest things that we're seeing here too is that we're pairing Armor Rouge with priority users instead. So the way it kind of works out is you
Indeed.
get the chip damage on the target you need to before an Armor Rouge comes out with the Trick Room that has usually already been set up, and you can usually just go for the Heat Wave right then and there.
Yep, this team seeming to not completely rely on that Trick Room, since it has the Sandy Shocks and it has the priority from and Hydreigon being fairly fast. If I remember correctly,
Hydreigon making a,
Hydreigon is like a base 97 or 98.
I think so. It might be slower.
98.
Okay, so you were exactly right.
I have a very good memory on these
And
things.
I do not.
Caesar is fairly slow, being, I believe, base 50. Azumarill is 50. Armarouge is 75. Amoonguss is base 30. Sandy Shocks at 101. Just barely outspeeding those goldfish flying around, which is where it really comes in handy. However, it's still unable to pick up those KOs because Earth Power going into that 120 special defense on Chi-Yu definitely just isn't quite strong enough, unfortunately.
And things that take ground type hits that are super effective don't take them well from special damage.
This is true. This is another Sandy Shocks here in the top 50, brought by Eli Knowlton, another West Coaster here, Northwesterner, bringing the Jumpluff and Torkoal core with a Sandy Shocks, Iron Hands, Arcanine, and Fluttermane. Sun to boost the Sandy Shocks, Terra Ice, and Terra Blast on this. Kind of a precursor to what everybody's expecting from the Regieleki, is what I feel like when I see that. You know, Earth Power, Terra Blast, Protect, and Thunderbolt holding a life orb. Just going for that massive Terra Ice damage into grass types like that Amoonguss, into the Dragonites, Garchomps, etc., into Great Tusk. That's an easy one-hit KO. Um, Obviously, the choice specs Fluttermane, Terra Steel, which is pretty interesting, being the nickname of that Pokemon while it's a Terra Fairy Pokemon. That's quite all of his Pokemon are actually nicknamed Terra types. I see. That's an interesting way to try and throw your opponent off.
I mean, there's a lot of ways you can
Honestly,
manipulate Open
that's
Team Sheet in your favor, and
hilarious.
throwing misinformation 6 times at your opponent is definitely one way to do it.
Yeah, naming his Arcanine Terra Normal, naming the Iron Hands Terra Fire, naming the Torkoal Terra Fire. That Sandy Shocks. While we were just talking about it being Terra Ice, it's named Terra Flying. That is an
This
interesting way to try and confuse your
this
opponent.
is this is trying to get into your opponent's head a little bit too much for me.
I kind of agree there, but it did push him up to 44th overall,
Oh,
6-3. So
do we
clearly,
do we want
either
to talk
that
about?
worked for him or he just piloted this team very well, regardless.
Do we want to talk about New Balance at all? The team, or just Balance at all? The team right above Eli.
Yeah, the Justin Tang team, New Balance. The exact same core that I brought: Iron Hands, Ting-Lu, Gyarados, Chi-Yu, Fluttermane, and Amoonguss. All of these Pokemon just being really consistent in the meta right now. Gyarados being the best Intimidator, Iron Hands just being Iron Hands. Sword Stance on Iron Hands. Phenomenal. Fluttermane obviously still topping off all of the charts everywhere. Chi-Yu now being its best partner. I'm seeing a lot of people running the Terra Blast, either Terra Water or Terra Grass, but definitely one of those two. And then Amoonguss, just Amoonguss. I don't think anything else needs to be said about that thing.
One of the coolest things about this team is that it has the option to always run two water types, and defensively that walls out Chi Flutter usually with enough
It
bulk investment
absolutely
to live the
does.
Flutter hits. Um,
It's funny. This team has 3 Terra Waters and 1 Water type natively. And that
and
one Water type is Terra Fairy.
the best electric type immunity user in the game with Tinglu.
This is also true until it Terra's Water.
And yeah, when it Terra Waters into Tinglu, it kind of opens itself into some different coverage, and that's kind of what happened in my personal experience against Justin Tang's team.
Yeah, Terra Water Ting, I actually ran into exactly that same issue a few times where I was going up against those Iron Hands. And that pesky, extremely bulky Iron Hands. And you're sitting there with your Ting Lu being your only really good answer to that Iron Hands. So you kind of are forced to terrestrialize, otherwise you provide it with way too much HP recovery. And then Terra Water then making you still weak to that Iron Hands just kind of leaves the Ting Lu in a tough spot. You almost don't want to terrestrialize it, but you absolutely need to.
But the thing is that when Tang terrestrializes it, he's always bringing the right three along with it. He's planning before the game starts which Pokemon he's going to terrestrialize.
Oh, absolutely. Of course he is. He's that good of a player. I mean, he took his
hmm
first ever regional all the way to the top and won it all. Won another one later in the same season and is still performing fairly well, coming in 6-3, barely bubbling out of the top cut for Fresno Regionals at 43rd. Um, but still obviously a fantastic player. He still has his Worlds invite already secured considering his performance so far this season. I
hmm
don't think there's too much for him to worry about other than just trying to see if he can get some travel award in on
No,
that.
it is kind of about that travel award at this point for Justin.
Hmm.
Um, I also would like to point out that even though he didn't make day two, he was in the PC the next day, where he went 5-1
Yep, he
and
went five
and
and one and lost to a
placed
flinch.
sixth and lost to a flinch to me. Man, I was able to get seventh just under Justin Tang in that PC. Um, and honestly,
Still a
I feel
really good
like I
record, four
had
and two. I mean, hey, no,
I had I had one of the biggest bubbles of all time. And that was kind of one of the things at Fresno that people were talking about. That it was just a massive bubble for both
that tournament
main
was
and side
very
event. It
stacked.
was
Yep, a
stacked.
lot of
Yeah.
the players that came were people that already had performed very well in the season and just were wanting to get a little bit more
Or
to either
already
earn those
had their
travel
world's
awards
invite.
or
Yeah,
wanting to
there's
get the travel awards or the world's invite. I mean, yep. The people going to secure those world's invites who almost had made it already, and the people who already earned that invitation trying to get that travel award, vying for those top places. in those top positions so that they can save some money trying to get to Japan this year.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. This is like the biggest world's back kind of back. This is Pokemon's big comeback scene, like kind of ramping up for their main event of the game, you know.
I definitely agree.
All eyes
Before
are
we
going to be on
wrap up
NISC
here
because
for today,
NISC is going to tell us what's going to happen at Worlds, even with a new format.
indeed.
It's going to tell us what people are already familiar with.
Yep. Although I do think Worlds is going to be just noticeably different by the end of it, you know? Everybody's
Yeah.
already preparing for Regulation D. There's going to be so many new Pokemon added into the meta, and it's definitely going to shake things up. Before
Yep.
we finish up here for today, though, there's one more team I want to cover, and that's going to be Gary Chan's team down here, pretty close to the bottom, unfortunately, down at 61st. But bringing a Pokemon that nobody's really seen at all this entire season, other than I think piloted by him. I believe he's the only person who's been bringing in that crocodile to these metas.
Crocodile was
Crocodile.
Ting Lu before it was cool.
Indeed, it was Ting Lu before it was cool with the physical version of that same ability, Intimidate. Crocodile was great in Gen 5. However, it's kind of fallen off in a lot of the later gens due to the defensive weaknesses of the dark type against fairies, which have been just dominant since that
It popped up a little
typing
bit
is
in Series
released.
1 for some Power Trip cheese,
It did. It definitely did. Power Trip is a solid move if you
but
use
this
it
is nowhere
correctly,
near
but
Power Trip.
this
This is
is,
damage control.
yep, Scarf Crocodile holding Earthquake, or holding Scarf with Earthquake, Rock Slide, Stomping Tantrum, and Snarl. With the Terra Ground, just to spam a lot of ground type moves next to hopefully that
Are they going to
Pelipper.
protect? You don't care. You hit Stomping
Indeed.
Tantrum.
Next to that Pelipper, with the Citrus Berry, Hurricane, Hydro Pump, Helping Hand, and Protect. Helping Hand boosted Earthquake, I think, is going to do a lot of damage there. And the Scarf Rock Slides, just being able to pick up some easy, quick spread damage onto targets that aren't necessarily expecting it.
Everybody's in this tournament is running their Armor Rouge like Ledge.
Armarouge, like Cerulege, is the right way to go. Terra Grass, Heat Wave, Energy Ball,
And
Standing
this one, I
Force,
think, is
Protect.
the
I mean,
only
it's
weak
really
armor
solid.
one that we've seen.
This is, I think, the only weak armor most of this top cut. It's very easy to go Terra Grass anyway, because if your opponent doesn't actually double check that team sheet, people tend to assume that you're Flash Fire and never even try to hit you with fire attacks in the first place, being scared of boosting the
Yeah,
damage that you'll do to.
yeah. This is a team that it builds its speed control through items and or natural boosts through weather.
Yep, the Swift Swim with the
It's not
Dreadnought.
so in a way you get your Tailwind boost through every single Pokemon on the team bringing their own beer.
Indeed, indeed. You know, this is a really interesting. Fluttermane being the only Paradox Pokemon, only thing that's not from Series 1 on this team. Indeedee, Armarouge, Pelipper, Dreadnought, Crocodile, and then that.
But boy, howdy, is he not scared of Chi one bit. No Flash Fire needed here.
Absolutely not. With the Rain and Rock Slide on that Dreadnought Liquidation, he's not terrified of Chi-Yu whatsoever. He's heading straight in. White Herb, Swift Swim, Shell Smash build as well. Ready to go in hard and do a lot of damage. Very, very.
A cool little note on that Armor Rouge being next to Pelipper is that because it's got that life orb kind of helps buffer the damage reduction in that heat wave. If you're ever forced into a position where you got to go for a neutral damage heat wave.
This is true. This is. All right.
So
Well, I
even
think that's where we're going
yeah,
to have to probably wrap it up for today.
what are we
Um,
talking today?
our final end of the podcast here. Our Calx. This is going to be actually one of my favorites here. Running the Farigiraf versus the Fluttermane. If you run that throat spray on your Farigiraf, Psyshock from Farigiraf actually is guaranteed to OHKO Fluttermane. Even some of these bulkier Fluttermanes you can do a lot of damage to. You run 252 HP on that Fluttermane, 252 defense, and you're still doing 80% damage to it. Drop the defense, and you're almost 100% guaranteed to OHKO Fluttermane at a 94% chance. Something that definitely sneaks up on people when they're not expecting it. Psyshock.
Yeah, after you told me about this calc, and after I experienced it firsthand on my traditionally non-bulky at all Fluttermanes, I decided to go out and change the stats on my main Fluttermane for my first draft of my parish team. Um, Afterwards, I made my cart Flutter physically bulky just to try and get a better damage roll against that Strike Shock because I was playing against you so often.
Psyshock does hit hard. You don't even have to terastallize for that either. That's just 252 special attack plus 1 with the throat spray does so much extra damage. And it's interesting because you can actually pair Farigiraf with a Chen Pao to guarantee that OHKO every single time. Even with 252 defense, Chen Pao makes that do so much damage. Almost a guarantee, 62.5% chance with a +1 on the Farigiraf, and that's absolute max Fluttermane bulk. So,
Yeah,
Farigiraf is in a spot going into Regulation D. Priorities on the rise. Dot priority moves. Helps a lot. An easy counter to those extreme speeds, you know, that are going to be popping up even more. Yeah, it can KO Fluttermane.
there you go. For a giraffe is your Fluttermane answer.
Farigiraf is definitely a Fluttermane answer. That's going to be it for today, everybody. Thanks so much for stopping by. We'll catch you
Thank
next time.
you.